In the old days, when we needed a copy of something on our page, we used to drive downtown and buy a photostat. Fortunately, it's a little easier now. There are more than a dozen ways to duplicate your text frames, graphic frames, and other items in InDesign. Here are just a few. My favorite way to make a duplicate of an object in InDesign is to hold down the Option or Alt key and drag an object. Here, I'll hold down the Option or Alt key and drag this caption down. And when I do that, it automatically makes a duplicate of it. Now in this case, I'd like my duplicate to be exactly lined up with the first, so I'm going to delete that, and instead of holding down Option or Alt, I'm going to hold down Option and Shift or Alt and Shift and drag this object down. That way it stays in perfect alignment horizontally or vertically. Now I could edit that text if I wanted to, but I'm going to move on and show you another way to duplicate that object. I'm going to delete this one that I just created, go back and select that caption one more time, and I'll duplicate it by going to the Edit menu and choosing Duplicate. Now an interesting thing happened. Not only did it make a duplicate of that object, but it did it with exactly the same offsets as the last duplication I did. It remembered. Isn't that cool? That turns out to be really useful in other ways too. For example, if I go to another page, like page 3, and select this frame and choose Duplicate, it moves it in exactly the same way as it did on the first page. Okay, let's go back to page 1 and do a couple more duplications. I'm going to select this white line at the top of the frame. It's on the master page, so I need to override it by holding down Command-Shift or Control-Shift on Windows. When I click on it, it overrides it and now lets me duplicate it. This time I want a whole bunch of these lines, so I'm going to go to the Edit menu, and I won't choose Duplicate, but instead Step and Repeat. Step and Repeat is a great way to make a lot of duplicates at the same time. You can either make it in one direction or as a grid. In this case, I only wanted to go down the page, so I'll turn off Create a Grid, and I'm going to specify how far down I want each line to go. I'm just going to type in 1 centimeter here. It'll convert that to pixels for me, and I'm going to start increasing this count by clicking on this up arrow. As I do, it starts adding duplicates. I'll just take a shortcut here and type in how many I want. How about 25? I'll hit Tab to jump to the next field, and you see it fills the whole page with these lines. I'll click OK, and I can see all my lines are created. Let's try another step and repeat. This time I'm going to create my own object. Maybe I'll just make a square on my page, and I'll fill it with this purple color, or you could pick any color you want out of here. Maybe something a little bit better like this yellow. How about that? Looks nice. Now I'm going to duplicate this. So I'll select it with a selection tool, go to Step and Repeat, and this time I am going to turn on Create as a Grid. And you'll see that it remembered that I want 25 at these same offsets, but that's not what I want to do here. I'm going to start off by just doing a grid of 2 by 2, and I'm going to set the offsets to about 100 pixels each. I'm just tabbing through from one field to the next. That looks pretty good, but I'd like a little bit more space, so maybe I'll up this to about 110 pixels. There we go. Looks good. Once I have the effect the way I want, I can increase the rows, maybe by 6 by 6, or perhaps one more column. 6 by 7 looks good. Click OK, and I have my grid. Now everybody knows you can do copy and paste to make a duplicate of an object, but sometimes it doesn't put it exactly where you want. For example, I'll deselect everything here with a Command-Shift-A or Control-Shift-A on Windows, and then I'll select my image and one of these captions. I'm going to go to the Edit menu and choose Copy, and then go to page 2 and paste. But when I paste, it always centers it on my screen. Not on the page, but centers it on the screen. In this case, that's not where I want it. I want it to be in exactly the same place as it was on page 1. So I'll delete that, and instead of choosing Paste, I'm going to choose something slightly different. Here in the Edit menu, I'll choose Paste in Place. Paste in Place tells InDesign to remember where it was when I copied it and put it in exactly the same place. Are you ready for one more way to duplicate your objects? All right, I'm going to deselect everything and select this caption. Now I'm going to go up to the Control panel, and in the Y field that determines how far down on the page this object is, I'm going to replace this with a different value, let's say 400 pixels. But instead of hitting Enter or Return like I normally would to have InDesign move it 400 pixels, I'm going to hold down Option or Alt while pressing Return or Enter. You remember what Option or Alt means, right? It means make a duplicate of it. And that's in fact exactly what's going to happen here. Option Return or Alt-Enter moves it down and duplicates it. That Option or Alt-Enter trick works in all the fields in the control panel, which, as we'll see later in this chapter, turns out to be really useful. Knowing more than one way to perform the same task in InDesign is helpful not just because you can impress your friends, but because the more ways you know how to do something, the more likely you are to use the most efficient technique in any given situation, especially when under deadline. In the next movie, we're going to look at one more brand new in CS6 method for duplicating objects, and this one could knock your socks off.